Hey everybody, what's up? This is Bill Murphy with MMORPG.com, and today we have the video review of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor from Warner Brothers Interactive and Monolith Studios. Now, this is the first sort of game that we've ever seen in Middle-earth. I mean, we've seen RPGs before, we've seen RTSs, we've seen even a MOBA set in that sort of movie cinematic universe that was created by Peter Jackson. But this is a game that's actually licensed by the Tolkien estate to take place in Middle-earth between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is a game that deviates from anything that's really written, but at the same time includes a lot of the stuff that you might have read in the Silmarillion if you're a hardcore Tolkien fan. Now, with a grain of salt, this isn't canon or anything like that. You're not going to start seeing books written about this or Tolkien coming back to life and saying, "Thank you for doing this." However, it's really cool to finally play a game set in Middle-earth that's an open-world action RPG that doesn't just shadow the Fellowship or shadow Frodo and Sam. It's actually pretty good, too, so why don't we get right to it. Tolkien purists, though you should be used to games taking liberties with Middle-earth by now, be forewarned. Like many other Middle-earth video games, Shadow of Mordor takes a lot of liberties in creating a new story between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. However, Monolith obviously went to great lengths to plumb the Silmarillion and delve into the tale of Celebrimbor, the elven lord who crafted the Rings of Power. Minor spoiler, he's the wraith that Talion becomes cursed with, which you find early on. Honestly, it's not much of a spoiler. And also, your partner throughout the adventure. You'll spend the game uncovering Celebrimbor's past, while fighting to free Talion from the curse and stop Sauron from re-entering Middle-earth. Talion himself is an exceptionally skilled fighter and captain of Gondor, but with Celebrimbor's wraith powers, he becomes essentially a Middle-earth demigod, and it's awesome to play as both. Now, I played the review copy provided by Warner Brothers and Monolith Productions, and I finished the main story campaign in about 19 hours. There are dozens of side missions and quests I did not finish, lots of little achievements and things you could do, collections and all that stuff. I'd say you could add probably another dozen or even more hours onto the time played if you weren't just rushing through the story like I was to meet my deadline. Now, I won't spoil too much of the story for you, as it's actually pretty damn good if you don't mind the embellishments of Monolith and aren't worried about canon in Middle-earth. I'm just glad we're finally getting a tale that really plumbs some of the areas that are gray about what happened between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. The gameplay of Shadow of Mordor will be instantly recognizable to anyone who's played Assassin's Creed. It's clear that Monolith got a lot of inspiration from Talion's adventure from Ubisoft's series. You'll climb Wraith Towers to gain new fast travel points. Much of the between main missions gameplay revolves around assassinations as well. In this way, Mordor does suffer from the same repetitive task syndrome that always plagues Assassin's Creed games. After 10 to 20 hours of killing bad guys, you'll start to wonder why the entire orc army isn't dead yet. But you'll also be thankful that genocide isn't possible, because the Nemesis system is something that really makes Shadow of Mordor take on a life all its own. There are two main halves to the game, the first half taking place at and around the Black Gate itself, and the other taking place in the greener but still shadowy pastures of Nirn. Once you move on to the latter, you can always move between the two freely, and even after beating the main campaign, you'll be able to fight orcs and work on all the side quests and build up Talion's skills. Sort of like a New Game Plus after you finish the main story. And of course there's DLC coming too, and if we're lucky we'll get to learn more about Torvin the Dwarf and Ratbag the Orc. Both of those are great characters you'll meet. I swear to God, I want to play nothing but more Ratbag the Orc quest, but I'm an orc fanatic, so there you go. Anyway, back to the Nemesis system. Every orc in Shadow of Mordor is procedurally generated. Captains and war chiefs alike have their own personalities, skills, fears, hates, and strengths. To truly fight back against the Black Hand and Sauron, you must infiltrate the orcs and learn to command them with the Wraith's powers. In the first half of the game, you do this by elevating Ratbag to the top of the food chain. In the second half, you learn how to brand and control the orcs, and to build your own army by taking over the war chief's mines. It may sound easy, but to have a better chance at taking down or supplanting the war chiefs, you must first take out their bodyguards or their captains. You can do this by commanding them to fight each other or simply by killing them off. It's all very complex. You see this big spider web of captains and the war chiefs, and you have to gain intel on them, and you can break up raids and dinner parties and grog drinking contests. It's actually really cool. Now, the only complaint I have about this system is at the end of the game, before you can finish the last mission, you absolutely have to take down all 5 of the war chiefs, or I should say take command of all 5 of the war chiefs. It felt a little bit like Legend of Zelda when you have to collect all the tri-pieces at the end of Wind Waker. That's kind of what it felt like, but not quite as bad and definitely not as boring. Luckily, Talion's not left to just his sword, bow, and dagger as you fight these guys. The surroundings can be used to your advantage too, as hanging slabs of meat can be shot down to attract Caragors. Think the feline version of wargs. Fires can be exploded and stealth can be employed. You can even ride giant troll-like creatures called Graugs. There are dozens of ways to take on every single fight in Mordor, and I could have spent a dozen hours or more just wandering around and messing with the orcs and screwing up their parties. I finished the main campaign, as I said, in about 19 hours, though it could probably be rushed in about 15 or so. Still, this left most of the side missions completely undone. Now, I will say that the skill system in Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is pretty good. This isn't a super deep RPG here. You have 2 main skill trees. You have one that focuses on the battle prowess of Talion himself, and one that focuses on the wraith powers of Celebrimbor. And you don't have to worry about picking and choosing one side, because chances are if you're playing the game a lot, you're going to be able to max out every single one of those skills. It's not like you have to choose one over the other. So in the beginning, as you're playing, just pick the ones you like the most and then worry about filling the rest later. By the end of the campaign, you will feel really overpowered, and that's a good thing, because this is a single-player RPG where you're supposed to get stronger, you're supposed to feel badass. You can chain stealth kills together by turning invisible, you can have these epically brutal finishing moves where you're lopping off heads and stabbing people left and right. Early in the game, these are harder to pull off, but towards the end of the game, you're doing it like constantly, and it just makes you feel like, well, a badass. Now, Shadow of Mordor is a visually stunning, narratively compelling action RPG that had me enthralled from start to finish. This is how you make a non-canon story in Middle-earth feel like it belongs, like it could be its own book or film in the world Tolkien created. It's violent, it's addictive, and it controls like a dream. The camera oftentimes gets lost in the terrain, and sometimes Talion's free running gets stuck on random objects, but those are minor quibbles in what's already one of my favorite games of the year. There are few fights more memorable in games than your battle with the Great White Graug or the Hammer, one of the Black Hand's minions. I don't want to spoil anything about it, but those fights are just so awesome, and you will be dying to take out the Hammer once he has his sort of opening monologue, I promise you. So, while the final fights against the Black Hand himself and the Tower are less memorable due in part to their over-reliance on quick-time events, the whole package more than makes up for the late-game shortcomings. Now, if you're a fan of open-world RPGs, you love the idea of killing and enslaving orcs, and you aren't too worried about tweaking Tolkien to serve the purpose of fun, you owe it to yourself to buy and play Shadow of Mordor. Talion's Quest is right up there as one of this year's best, and Monolith should be very proud of their work.